today we're going to start Unit 5, which is all about polynomial functions. The first objective is just talking about different aspects of polynomials so that we can talk about them with the correct vocabulary and also just being able to do basic things with polynomials. Learning Target 1, which is what we're going to talk about today, says I can understand the language of mathematics with regards to polynomials. So this is talking about being able to use terms such as leading coefficient, constant, degree, number of terms, and standard form. The first word that we're going to talk about is polynomial. A polynomial we're going to define as a sum or difference of one or more terms. Remember, sum means adding, and difference means subtracting. So we're going to put a plus sign here to remind us, and a minus sign here to remind us. And then we're going to look down here at the bottom. Here is an example of a polynomial right here. When we talk about terms of a polynomial, we're talking about each of these little clumps of numbers and letters multiplied together. So like this is a term right here, this is a term, this is a term, this is a term, and this is a term. And notice that each of these terms are separated by addition or subtraction. That's what we mean when we talk about a sum or a difference of one or more terms. This is a sum or a difference of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. The next word that we're going to talk about is coefficient. So a coefficient we're going to define as a number multiplying a variable in a term. So if we look down here, that is a term, that's a term, that's a term, that's a term, and that's a term. And the coefficients are the 5, the 6, the x, or I guess there's nothing right there, just a 1, and there's no coefficient right there. So really the coefficients are this 5 and this 6. There's no coefficient there, there's no coefficient there, and there's not really a coefficient here because there's no variable there. Okay? So the coefficients are 5 and 6 is what's written. Here, it's like there's a coefficient of, really it's a -1, and here, a +1. And there's no coefficient in this term, so ignore that. There's no coefficient in this term because there's no variable. A coefficient is a number multiplying a variable. There's no variable, so that's not a coefficient. 5 is a coefficient, 6 is a coefficient, -1 because that's minus, and if there's nothing in front of it, we assume there's a 1 right there. So coefficients are 5 and 6 and -1 and a +1 right there. And these are all the coefficients. The next term we're going to talk about is constant. Constant is a term that has no variable. So this right here, that would be a constant term because there's no x. It's just a number. The degree of a polynomial, now we're going to write kind of small because we're actually going to define two things here. On the first line, we're going to say what the degree of a polynomial is. The degree of a polynomial is the degree of the term the greatest degree. And we'll talk about what that means in just a second. The other thing that we're actually going to define here is degree of a term. I'm going to underline that nice and dark. That's another thing we're going to add. So the degree of a term is the sum, remember that means adding, of the exponents in the term. So if we look down here as an example, the degree of this term is 4 because adding up all the exponents that we see in this term right here is just 4. So the degree of this first term is 4. The degree of this second term is 3 because all the exponents that we see there is 3. So the degree of the second term is 3. The degree of this term is 2 because all the exponents, when we add them all up, is just a 2. So the degree of this term is 2. Here, there is a degree of 1. And here, technically it has a degree of 0 because there is no x. It's like x to the 0 power, which is really just 1. So we'll just say that the degree here is 0. Okay? Now the degree of the polynomial is whatever the degree of the greatest degree is. So if we look at all these degrees, the biggest degree is 4. So that means that the degree of this polynomial is 4. So we'll say over here, degree of this polynomial is 4. Because that's the degree of the biggest term, or the term that has the biggest degree. The next thing we're going to talk about is term number, the number of terms. So the terms is however many terms are in the polynomial. And remember that these are separated by adding and subtracting. So in this case, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms in this polynomial. Now, standard form is a way to write polynomials with two things that you're making sure are happening. So we're going to say writing, and again, write kind of small because there's a lot to do here. Writing a polynomial so that the first thing that we're going to talk about is all like terms are combined, and the second thing is that the terms are written in descending order based on their degree. So notice that all of the like terms are combined. There's not two different x squareds that we could put together or two different x to the fourth that we could put together. And these terms are written in the order where of descending order of their degrees. So first comes the biggest one, and then the smaller degree, the next smaller degree, next smaller, and then this one. So it's like the degree of 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So it's written in descending order based on their degrees. If all the like terms are combined and the terms are written in descending order, that means it's in standard form. So just to practice writing polynomials in standard form, we just have these 4 down here that we're going to do pretty quickly here. The first one, we need to make sure that first of all like terms are combined. So we have an x to the third, we have an x to the fourth, an x to the first, really, and an x squared. So there's nothing that we can combine there because they all have different powers, which means they're not like terms. So we're good for the first one. Then the second condition for standard form is that they're written in descending order, which means you start with the biggest and then you get smaller as you go. So if I'm looking at the powers, the biggest power is this 4 right here, x to the fourth. So I'm going to write that term first. And when I move these terms, I'm going to keep the sign in front of it with it. This is not just a 4x squared. This is actually a negative 4x squared. So I'm going to write negative 4x, to the fourth power first. This is not just a 4x to the fourth, it's a negative 4x to the fourth. And after I write the first one, now I'm going to look for the next biggest. So after a degree of 4, my next biggest degree is this degree of 3 right here. And it's a positive, so I'm going to write plus 3x to the third. After that, my next biggest degree is this 2, so I'm going to write minus x squared. And after that, my next biggest degree is x to the, that's like x to the first power right there. So I'm going to write plus x. So now that's in standard form. My like terms are combined, and they're written in descending order according to each term's degree. 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's look at this one. First of all, we need to make sure that all of our like terms are combined. We have 9x to the third. We have 2x squared here that we have to put together. So I'm going to start with my 9x to the third because I know that comes first. And then I'm going to move on to my squares. And when I write over here, I'm going to combine them together. So if I have 10x squared minus 8x squared, that's actually 2x squared because 10 take away 8 is 2. So I've dealt with this one and I've dealt with these ones. Over here, after x squared, my next biggest degree would be x to the first power, and I have these two terms that both have x to the first power, so I'm going to combine those together and make them 9x. That says 9x right there. So I've dealt with those, and then lastly is this one, my minus 3. So I've written them from the highest degree to the lowest degree, 3, 2, 1, 0, and I have all my like terms combined. Let's look at this one. We have no cubes, no squares. Our biggest degree here is 1. We have x to the first and an x to the first. I'm going to combine those when I write it over here because in order to be in standard form, remember, all of the like terms have to be combined. So I'm not going to write two separate things. I'm going to write 4x minus 3x equals 1x. And then I'm just going to know that that's to the first power. I don't have to write this one. I'm just writing it right now. And then we have x to the 0 powers right here. There's no x, so that's our last thing that we're going to write. So we have a 6 and an 8, and that gives us 14. So I can write 1x plus 14, or I can just write x plus 14. So my like terms are combined, and that's written in descending order. First is my x to the first power, and then this is really like x to the 0 power because there is no x. So look at this next one here. First, my biggest power looks like it's a 3 up here. So I'm going to do that term first. I have negative 3x to the third plus 7x to the third. So that's a positive 4x to the third power. So I've taken care of these two, and then the only one left is this plus 4. And so now that term is also written in that polynomial is also written in standard form. And that is how you write polynomials in standard form and also identify various parts of a polynomial.